In a universe over 14 billion years old, with trillions of galaxies, hundreds of millions of stars, what are the chances that we're alone?
We are only now finding out about human origins, and it is a problem that science has established itself as the new world religion, and it fears the revelation of an antecedent civilization with higher technology than we possess today.
Something is in Antarctica that I personally think every human being on this planet deserves to know the truth about.
They have a 35-year ban on going to Antarctica without permission from the UN. So what are they hiding there?
Whatever the history is that would explain ancient artifacts on Mars, on the Moon, on Earth, and perhaps other bodies in our solar system, it's all attributed to these progenitors.
We've started building our own facilities in Antarctica, trying to take control of the area and possibly share a base with these alien beings.
If any of this is true, if one case is true, this is a game changer. Whether it's UFOs, alien abductions, hybridization program, aliens among us, the skeptics have to be right every day. The believers only have to be right once. And not only does the world change, but the world has changed. The world is a fundamentally different place than we believe it to be.
We are at a time where more and more dots seem to be coming into place, and that other intelligences have been coming into our solar system for a very, very long time.
The inventor of movies on a trip to nowhere. The inventor of motion pictures, Louis Le Prince, had a promising future. On the 16th of September, 1890, he presented his new invention at the Opera of Paris, motion pictures. It was the birth of cinema and movies. But exactly on this day, Le Prince got on a train in Paris and was never seen again. Both French authorities and British detectives conducted intense investigations, without result. Thomas Edison finally collected the laurels for this invention. The Le Prince family went to court against Thomas Edison because he claimed to be the sole inventor of cinema. The Le Prince family were also convinced that people linked to Edison had Le Prince killed, but a body was never found. Inexplicably, Edison won in court and put the movie industry into his control for decades, similar to how Edison and the people behind him took credit for the inventions of Nikola Tesla. At the same time of his disappearance, Le Prince was about to patent his movie projector in the UK and then traveled to the U.S. for a scheduled New York exhibition. Some people claimed that he committed suicide due to financial difficulties, but his widow not only denied such difficulties, but also strongly denied that he would commit suicide at the very peak of his success. 7 years later, Louis Augustin Le Prince was declared dead. The story is fairly well documented. What is less known is that Le Prince had been talking about time travel to his family. He had told his sister that he was able to travel to the future and bring ideas for technology back into this time. Considering he was the first to introduce movies, the idea that he might have traveled to the future to get the idea doesn't seem quite that far-fetched. How do you come up with ideas for moving pictures in 1890 unless you have at least some sense of the future? Perhaps he introduced the idea a little too early and was removed for his invention by people around Edison who preferred to have a monopoly on technology. Edison is widely considered the greatest inventor of all time, but I suspect he might be the greatest fraud of all time. I share this story because it's in a class all its own, namely that of inventor claiming to get ideas from the future. If you look into inventors a little, you'll find that many have made the claim that they somehow have access to the future from which they derive their ideas. Anyone with at least some intuitive feel for the future will be able to predict trends and tendencies far in advance. The Hotel from Nowhere. The following story originates from the old British TV show Arthur C. Clarke's World of Strange Powers. The show was respectable in that it used its own researchers to vet stories and claims of the paranormal. The story comes from two couples from Dover, England, that had apparently spent a night in a hotel from the past. In 1984, the story was once again newly researched and reenacted for an episode of the TV series. The reason it was widely considered as probably true is because of various congruencies found in the aftermath of the story. In October 1979, Len and Cynthia Gisby and their friends Jeff and Pauline Simpson decided to travel to France. They took a ferry over the English Channel to drive through France and northern Spain for 2 weeks. On the 3rd of October, at around 9:30 p.m., they were on a highway north of Montélimar in southern France. They had spent a pleasant day and were growing tired. It had gotten dark and was time to find a place to stay for the night. They stopped at a nice-looking motel. Len went to the reception first to inquire about free rooms. Len reported that the man was wearing a somewhat strange plum-colored uniform. The receptionist told them no rooms were available. He recommended another hotel and told them to drive down the highway and another road, assuring that they would have rooms available. Len thanked him and the couples drove away. On the way, Cynthia noticed how old the buildings looked. The posters that were glued to houses were advertising for a circus. It seemed to be a really old-fashioned circus, Pauline later said. That's why it fascinated us so much. The men noticed the streets that started showing a lot of potholes and unevenness and became very narrow. After a while, they noticed that there was no more traffic, and they started wondering whether their plan was all that good. But in some distance, they saw lights and drove on. They stopped at a building right at the street. It was a deep, long building with a number of bright windows. A few men stood in front of it. Cynthia got out, but soon came back to the car. It's not a hotel, it's a restaurant. They continued their drive through an avenue of trees on both sides of a dark road, and soon reached other buildings. One of them seemed to be a police station. The other said hotel. Relieved that their trip seemed to be over, Len got out and asked the reception for accommodation. He returned to the car thankful. They do have rooms. The tired drivers unpacked their bags while wondering about the old-fashioned, farm-like style of the hotel. They entered the hotel, and there too found farm-like conditions. The building had 2 floors. Neither the Simpsons nor the Gisbys spoke French, and the receptionist or manager apparently spoke no English. The communication was just barely enough to show them their rooms. The strange atmosphere continued all the way to their rooms. Everything was old and made of heavy wood. There were no tablecloths on the dining room tables, and there didn't seem to be any phones or any other modern gadgets. The beds in the rooms were big, but they had no pillows, only cushion pads. The blankets were heavy, and the mattresses sacked down in the middle. The doors had no locks. They had wooden bolts. The couples had to share a bathroom with old-fashioned toilet drainage and soap that was attached to a metal bar in the wall. But they were too tired to wonder about it. They went to bed and slept through the night. The next morning they went down to the dining room for breakfast. The breakfast was quite simple: bread, marmalade, and coffee. Jeff remembered that the coffee tasted horrible. While they had breakfast, another woman entered the dining room and sat down somewhere across from them. She wore a silk evening gown and carried a dog in her arm. It was so strange, Pauline remembers. She looked as if she had come from a dancing ball, but it was 7 a.m. Then 2 policemen in dark blue uniforms, capes, and big pointed hats arrived. They looked ridiculous. Much different than the policemen that we saw elsewhere in France, remembered Jeff. Their uniforms were also old-fashioned. Len and Jeff wanted to ask the policeman for the best way to the Avignon by autoroute, the highway, but the officers didn't understand the word autoroute. At the time, Jeff assumed it was because of his poor French. Before they left the hotel, they shot a few photos. Jeff took pictures of Pauline at the framed windows. Len took 2 photos of Cynthia. They stowed their stuff in the car, and Len went to the manager asking for their invoice. The man scribbled the amount on a piece of paper and showed him the bill, which came to the amazingly small sum of 19 francs, a value of about $3. Len tried to explain to the receptionist that the price was too low, but he insisted that the price was correct. He paid and they left the hotel. The rest of their vacation was uneventful. They went to Spain. On their way back to England through France, they decided to stop at the same hotel they had been to before because they were flabbergasted by its low price. They found the exit, and they also saw the strange circus posters again, so they knew they were on the right way. But they could not find the hotel. They were worried enough to drive back to the first motel on the highway and ask for directions to that hotel. But the receptionist had no idea of any hotel in the area. Not only that, he also denied the existence of a colleague in a plum-colored uniform. The 2 couples drove up and down the street 4 times, but they found no hotel. It had disappeared. They noted that the area looked very similar to the one they had been to a few days before, but also that it somehow looked different, even though they couldn't define what exactly was different. Puzzled, they continued their journey until they arrived in Lyon, where they spent the night in a hostel for 247 francs, around $40. After their trip, the mystery deepened when they looked at their freshly developed photographs. Jeff had taken 20 pictures and Len had taken 36. The photos in the hotel were supposed to be in between the others, but they were missing. Nor were there any corrupted negatives. Every film was fully used, as if the pictures had never been made. They had disappeared, just like the hotel. During the filming of the TV show, the Simpsons and Gisbys were flown back to France to film their search of the hotel. Jeff Simpson said, "When we went back, we had yet another look around. Once we even thought we might have found the hotel, but it wasn't our hotel, just some old house that was completely different. At the place where we all agreed and were sure that our hotel stood, there was nothing." The French Tourist Information Office in Lyons said that there was no hotel as the one the Simpsons and Gisbys described. In July 1985, journalist and paranormal researcher Jenny Randles, accompanied by her colleagues Linda Taylor and Harry Harris, spent an evening with the Simpsons. After the interview, they were scheduled to go to the practice of Dr. Albert Keller for hypnosis session, to be regressed back to that day. Pauline was unable to be hypnotized, but Jeff turned out to be a good subject. He gave a detailed description of the event, but no new elements were discovered. The hypnosis session did confirm that Jeff was remembering an event that actually happened. A question that remained unanswered was, why did the manager and the other people from the past not notice the car that must have looked futuristic? Why did the receptionist not notice that the money they paid with was from 1979? And my most important question is, why was there no research into whether there was a hotel at that place in another time? That bothers me the most about so many of these paranormal mystery TV shows. They're strong in sensationalism and marketing, but weak in research and thoroughly unsatisfying in the pursuit of truth. The reason I share this story anyway is because time slips are real. I have experienced a few of them personally, so I am more than willing to believe in others' experience. In fact, I probably wouldn't bother writing this book if I hadn't had my own experiences in time travel.